Europe, with its varied populations and rich cultural heritage, has long had sway over international politics and economics. Europe has maintained diplomatic ties with many countries throughout the world over the years, including China. Europe's interest in deepening its ties with China has increased as a result of China's emergence as a significant political and economic force. As a result, a lot of European countries are looking into ways to work with China in a variety of areas, such as trade, investment, and technology. The consequences of Russia's attack on Ukraine were unexpected. One of them is that, more than a year after the conflict started, European leaders started courting China's President Xi Jinping. Despite their harsh stance against Russia, the EU surprised everyone by showing some leniency toward Russia's most important ally. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, was seated next to Xi Jinping at a Beijing meeting. Xi Jinping mentioned relying on Putin to return Russia to the bargaining table and to its senses, without denouncing Putin's war. Over the past 10 years, there has been instability in China's relationship with the European Union. After protracted negotiations, they came to an investment agreement in 2020, but political differences have put it on hold for the time being. China is viewed as a system rival by the EU, particularly in light of the European Parliament members' sanctions by the Chinese government for criticizing their treatment of Uyghur Muslims. The lack of personal contact caused by the pandemic has exacerbated tensions. However, some EU members are offended because they think the bloc cannot succeed in becoming a major player in the world if it does not have close economic ties with China. Ursula von der Leyen expressed her worries regarding the recent actions taken by China. She claimed that China had turned into a more hostile and repressive nation. She thought China had given up on reformism and prioritized national security over international collaboration. Furthermore, China is being accused by Ursula von der Leyen of attempting to reorganize the world order in order to further its own interests. She did stress, though, that these problems shouldn't cause Europeans to flee China. Rather, they ought to concentrate on reducing the risks in their alliances without totally severing ties with China. The European Union is currently under fire for putting its economic goals ahead of injustice throughout the world. But many were taken aback when the EU adopted a firm stance against Russia by coordinating military assistance and imposing sanctions. Prominent diplomats and officials from the UN and NATO have praised this. Putin's close ally was spared punishment by the EU, in contrast to what happened to Russia. Some European officials realized that their relationship with China might be even more important than before as a result of the crisis in Ukraine. Geographical, economic, and strategic constraints prevent Europe from adopting the same tough stance as the US in cutting diplomatic ties with China, according to a European diplomat. They are also unable to separate from China and Russia at the same time. The ambassador claimed that rising energy costs are a result of sanctions against Russia. You see, in order to switch from relying on Russian gas to renewable energy, they need to buy inexpensive solar panels. One of the main suppliers of inexpensive solar panels is China. Additionally, they are unable to give up both their new and old energy sources at the same time. No one is sufficiently ignorant, according to a different diplomat, to support the unrestricted use of Chinese technology. Nonetheless, the majority of diplomats are aware that in order to achieve their long-term goals, which include gaining geopolitical influence over China, they need a robust economy. Additionally, their geopolitical significance will fade if their economy is struggling. In the meantime, European leaders ought to become less dependent on the US and stay out of the US-China-Taiwan dispute, according to French President Emmanuel Macron. President Macron emphasized his vision of France leading Europe toward strategic independence and becoming a third global power. He voiced worry that Europe might become embroiled in outside conflicts that would impede its efforts to establish strategic independence. Macron's proposal for strategic autonomy has received strong support from Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Communist Party. When interacting with countries in Europe, they bring it up often. Leaders and intellectuals in Beijing firmly believe that China is rising and the West is fading. They believe that this trend will accelerate if the transatlantic relationship is weakened. Macron added that it would be puzzling if Europe freaked out and started copying the US. Is it really in the best interests of Europeans to rush a crisis in Taiwan? Macron cautioned that the worst-case scenario would be for China to overreact and turn into an ally of the United States on this matter. Furthermore, other EU officials think the European Union is crucial to China's success. According to Commission officials, China plays a critical role in the fight against climate change. According to a senior Commission official, China's backing of Russia is probably a calculated move to win over voters at home by endorsing a non-Western, non-NATO ally. The official, however, speculates that in the long run, this strategy might be more advantageous to the West than to Russia. The official stated that China's economy is the source of its power. China and the EU trade more than China and Russia combined. They observed the impact of sanctions on Russia and desired to avoid experiencing it for themselves. Furthermore, China aspires to maintain the world's power balance and be seen as a responsible global player. Although the outlook is positive, member nations, including France and Germany, which were once more forgiving of China, are now exercising greater caution than before. A prominent government figure from an EU member state voiced worries that managing problems with China in addition to Russia would be a challenging geopolitical task. Macron's attempts to restore relations with China are welcomed by all, but concerns have been raised about the result and China's actions in relation to Ukraine. Hardliners in the EU regarding China are concerned, but they understand that Europe cannot simply cut ties with Russia and leave China behind. It is agreed upon by 3 diplomats representing the most assertive states that Europe must maintain open lines of communication with China. They did, however, emphasize that China might join the conflict and that Europe should stop China from arming Russia. China needs to follow European regulations, thus Europe needs to lead the negotiating process. There is concern that China may view requests for peacemaking between Russia and Ukraine as a victory for European security if they are granted. Policy fellow Alicia Bacholska of the European Council on Foreign Relations thinks Europe has an opportunity to alter its economic relations with China. According to her, Europe needs to acknowledge China's economic dominance and endeavor to diversify its economy. And while getting China to reverse course in Ukraine is a difficult task, the EU needs to engage Beijing economically. Alexander Stubb, the former Prime Minister of Finland, believes that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has brought an end to the Cold War and ushered in a new global order. So, Europe needs to be near the US while still having ties to China if it hopes to play a big part in this new order. Many question whether the US-led world order would reappear after Putin invaded Ukraine and the West responded accordingly. But the problem with China hasn't gone away. Choosing a position in a world with multiple poles is becoming more challenging and risky for Europe. What do you think about the EU's stance on China? Is it better for them to cooperate with China and keep their distance from the US? Let me know down below. If you want to continue to learn about business investing and financial education, we have got this video waiting on the screen for you to check out. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.